Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit. Infravision. I've had a look at BX. I've gone back to hit the books, and Infravision is a heat sensing sight which allows a character to see 60 feet in the dark. That's that. Okay, so that's pretty OSR. Now if we contrast that to 5e, we've got Darkvision, as it is now called. Accustomed to life underground, you have superior vision in dark and dim conditions. You can see in dim light within 60 feet of you as if it were bright light, and in darkness as if it were dim light. You can't discern colour in darkness, only shades of grey. Darkvision, Infravision, call it what you will. OSR, Infravision, we'll go with that. Okay, now I've got a problem. In total darkness, this for me is too powerful. I don't know what else to say. It just causes me grief. You get a party, some of them's got Infravision, some of them not. You've constantly got to remember who has, who hasn't. You're giving descriptions. You've got to remember, firstly, whether in the scenario, whether your rooms or your encounter involves some form of light, then whether the party's carrying light sources. If they're not, perish the thought, they're trying to stumble around in the darkness, hanging on to their pet dwarf or whatever. You've then got to deal with the Infravision people. And then you've got to change all your sort of picture in your head and turn it into either some sort of blurry night sight kind of description, or just shades of grey description. Well, I've about had enough of this, and I'd like to know what other people's thoughts are. If I ran a campaign where I just kind of did away with player characters having demi-humans and Infravision, well, there's going to be a backlash. Not that I'm that fussed, but it seems a little draconian. The other thing I could do is sort of nerf it a little bit. So let's say the Infravision works in low light conditions, but in total darkness, it just ceases to function. And for me, I've got less trouble with that. Another couple of problems. What happens when you've got Infravision and you're suddenly presented with an increase in light? So what happens there? Do you get sort of semi-blinded momentarily? How does this all work? I mean, if you're out in the woods at night and you don't use a torch, you might use, say, like infrared or something like that, a red filter on a light to keep your night vision. I think it takes roughly about a half hour for your eyes to adjust properly. If you keep one eye closed or covered when someone's using an unprotected light source, you can retain your night vision. But if your eyes are open and someone flashes a head torch in your face or something, that's kaput. I mean, it's like dazzling, and for a little while afterwards, you can't see a thing. So why is there none of that going on with it? So that's not cool. I'm not cool with that at all. And the other thing, of course, is darkness is a kind of primordial fear. That's my understanding of it. As kids, a lot of kids, and even getting into adulthood, people are frightened of the dark. If you're stuck hundreds of feet underground and you run out of light, good luck to you, because that's going to be bad news. If you've got Infravision, we ain't worried about that. We'll just walk out of here. And the other thing, heat sensing. How accurate is that? If a guy jumps into a pool of cold water, can you not see him anymore once his temperature gets down to the temperature of the water? There's a whole pile of questions there. I might be looking into it too much. What does everyone else think?
Hey Colin, Frank T here from Frank T's Liner Notes. Just wanted to weigh in on Infravision. It can be complicated, but it doesn't have to be complicated. If you look at the basic D&D rulebook, the Moldvay version, on page 59, there's a sample dungeon expedition where the DM makes a ruling very early on in the game that the torchlight interferes with the infravision. So I think you could easily do that on a regular basis.
Yeah, that was a good catch. I checked out the Moldvay Basic, page 59, and sure enough, yeah, I missed it.
The example is given in an early edition that rulings trump rules, and make it your own game. Just keep it consistent. As long as everybody's having fun, you're doing it right.
I can tell you, I don't play 5e, so that Darkvision nonsense, no idea, man. Don't even pretend to know anything about that. But now, infravision, I've never really had a problem with it because in most cases, my parties never are all demi-humans. There's always somebody that needs a torch. And if you've got a torch out, basically the way, at least I play, I think the way most retro clones work, is if there's any sort of ambient natural light, infravision's done. Doesn't work. So, like, your players would have to go outside the range of the light. Otherwise, their infravision doesn't work. Problem solved.
Low light vision. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And it got crazier. I don't remember what edition, if it was partially AD&D, second or third, but they started throwing in ultravision and low light and made everything kind of weird and crazy. I kind of do like the way 5e did it with, hey, you just got dark vision, that's it. It's not that big a thing for me anyway. But I'll do say these couple things. One, like I was talking about on GM screens, how I do like a little sheet. The other thing I do is like a PC log sheet, knowing who is what and having the key details of everybody's character handy so I don't have to ask them every 5 minutes, what's your saving throw? Or, something like that. Or who has dark vision again? Because, well, if there's one dwarf and 3 humans, it doesn't matter that the dwarf has it when there's a fight breaks out. Also, 2 things. Magical darkness, nobody sees through that unless there's, well, something magical to see through it. And the other one, even if they've got infravision, most undead are room temperature. Ha ha ha.
Sounds to me like a bit of a sneaky character. Magical darkness and undead. Going back to the old original Little Brown books, there's no mention of dark or infravision in said 3 little books. The original Brown books and Moldvay both Basic are obviously contradicting each other. I thought I'd go and see what some other systems have got to say. Basic Fantasy was the first one I had a look at. They describe on page 36 an ability to see in total darkness. Character with this ability can see in black and white only, otherwise the sight is normal. So it's basically just like watching a black and white telly. Dark vision does not grant one the ability to see in magical darkness. So that's a pretty common theme, along with the 30 to 60 foot kind of range. Some characters, I'm not sure which ones have 30 foot range, and then the more common 60 foot range is used. And it is totally ineffective in any light greater than moonlight. I think this was really where my inspiration originally came in. Veins of the Earth. They got some really interesting ideas on light, so much so that it's actually used as a currency. Their way of looking at it is time, distance, light, money and weight are all kind of bound together. And this breaks down into an hour of light equates to 1 loom, which is their chosen currency. That is equal to 1 silver. That makes light about 10 times more valuable than it is in your standard OSR game. They've even got a whole system for different types of lanterns, and it's tied into initiative. They dial up the whole dangerous aspect of being in the dark. They call any sort of infravision, I like the way they describe it, they call it dark piercing sight. And they explain that dark can work differently in the veins of the earth. Dungeons are puddles of darkness, and the veins are the sea. After that, it more or less like leaves the rules to the referee, but it does stress that any creature not described as blind still needs light to see. They may be able to find their way around slowly underground without light, but in a battle, lack of light will be a severe disadvantage. This is a bit more the feel that I'm trying to capture, this sort of the threat of the darkness, the challenge and the obstacle of the darkness.
I think you make a good point about infravision and dark vision in particular, how it can remove that fear of the darkness and the unknown, which is epitomised so much in the OSR style of gaming, particularly if you like dungeon crawling or something like that. I mean, I think one of the ways you could nerf it potentially is to reduce it down to low light vision. So it's not a case of people being able to see perfectly in the dark. They can just see better when there's a little bit of light, like a slight bit of moonlight or the glowing embers of a fire, but it's still no use in complete darkness. That might be one way of sort of nerfing it a little bit without removing it entirely. But if someone waves a light at someone, I think particularly if it's a source of heat like a torch, then yeah, you're definitely justified in saying that they should be disorientated or blinded temporarily.
You can go totally the other way. So we've got systems like 13th Age. No mention of it at all. It's just hand-waved. The spirit of those rules would seem to suggest, if you want to have something like that, you just make a ruling on it, chuck it in. And that's similar with a few other sets I looked at. This Swords and Wizardry Light doesn't engage with infravision as far as I can tell. DCC, that basically just refers to some races being able to see in the dark, but doesn't really define what seeing in the dark is. Sharp swords and sinister spells, you don't have demi-humans, and any of them systems without demi-humans, they kind of, they've sidestepped the whole issue, really. I haven't looked at how those systems work with monsters, to be fair. I'm just kind of approaching it in a PC angle. What I'm saying is, you've got the whole range, as per usual, of different ideas, and some of them are obviously very contradictory. So in the tradition of OSRs, I'm going to be looking to make a ruling on this one, and I think I'm going to go with kind of a low light vision idea, not really to be confused with the Dungeons and Dragons, or is it 3 or 3.5 definition of low light vision.
Hey, just a couple further thoughts. Having just looked at this in BX, it basically says every creature that is listed as a monster has infravision. So, which it describes as being able to see shades of gray that are determined that reflect body heat. So, if you're going to go with something that is simply low light, for the PCs that might work, but for the monsters that won't work, because think about the monsters that are living deep in a dungeon. They're not going to have any light whatsoever unless they themselves are carrying some sort of light. So you could kind of be crippling the monsters if you do away with it completely, which I don't think you're doing, but because you're focusing more on the heroes or the party. But I just wanted to mention that.
What I want to try and create is that idea that they've got some sort of like cat or nocturnal animals type of vision. I'm going to do a little bit of research on Google, look into those creatures and the biology behind it all, just because that sort of thing interests me. I know it's a fantasy game and everything, but if I can get a little bit of a scientific background on things, it just helps me kind of get a handle, and it helps me understand the logic behind my decisions.
Hey Colin, this is Jason from Random Screed. Hey man, I've been trying to catch up on Anchorcasts and I am way behind. I think I created some sort of monster with all the people that are jumping in and getting involved and talking about stuff, so that's fantastic actually, and I'm glad that you're a part of it. Also, I got to infravision, and I think most of the guys who called in on the couple of episodes covered it pretty well. My advice, it's your game, do it your way, man. However you feel happy. Yeah, let torchlight affect it. You can actually blind them once in a while with bright light. You can do fun stuff like that, and if you actually make it take a half hour, man, that's huge. You're talking 3 turns. So keep it going, Colin. Good to talk to you. Later.
I fell into a spike pit. Oh yeah, a spike pit. it would have spikes in it.